These are fruit tarts, the perfect summer treat with beautiful homemade sweet pastry, a pastry cream filling, and then topped with some gorgeous fresh fruit. So if you want to give them a go, here's everything you need. To begin, we're going to start by making the sweet pastry. Now this is very simple and we're going to make it even easier by using a food processor, but you can absolutely do this by hand if you like. I'll begin by placing 150 grams of plain flour into the food processor, followed by 75 grams of cold unsalted butter that I've diced up nice and small. I'll then add in 50 grams of icing sugar or powdered sugar and pulse it until it resembles fine breadcrumbs. If you were doing this by hand, you would just place those ingredients into a bowl and rub them between your fingers and thumbs until you have a breadcrumb-like consistency. Then I'm going to add in 1 egg yolk and pulse it again until it comes together. If you feel it needs a little extra liquid to come together, add a splash of cold water, but do this gradually because you don't want the mixture to be too wet. Once it starts to clump together in the food processor like this, that's when you know it's ready. When you can pick it up with your hands, press it together, and it holds together. Now that means that it's ready. So now we'll wrap that up in some parchment paper and place it into the fridge to rest for at least half an hour. So that's the pastry done. How easy was that? That is now in the fridge resting, and we're going to make our pastry cream or creme patisserie or thick custard filling. So for that, we're going to place 250 milliliters of whole milk into a saucepan, and then we're going to heat that up over a low heat until just before boiling. As soon as you see it starting to steam, you can remove it from the heat. And while our milk is heating up, I'll keep a close eye on it, but I'm going to separate 4 eggs, and we only want the yolks for this recipe. I'll save the egg whites for something else. So I'm going to place the egg whites to one side. I'm just going to pass the yolk from shell to shell and then place it into the bowl. And then into my 4 egg yolks, I'm going to place 40 grams of sugar, 15 grams of corn flour or corn starch, and 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. Whisk those ingredients together until fully combined. So by this point, our milk should be about ready. It's just steaming, so it's nice and hot, and we need to temper the eggs. So that means to pour a small amount of milk into our egg mixture and whisk it in, and then we can slowly add in the rest, and then we'll place the whole custard mixture back into the pan and place it over the heat and whisk it continuously until nice and thick. We'll then transfer the pastry cream into a bowl, press a sheet of greaseproof paper to the surface and place it into the fridge to chill down completely. The greaseproof paper just helps to stop it from forming a skin when it cools down in the fridge. So now we can move on to making our tart shells. I'm making small individual ones this time, but you could make a big one if you want. You could use a 24 centimeter tin for this amount of pastry and you'll have a beautiful bigger tart. But as I say, I'm making the individual ones. So I'm going to begin by lightly flouring my workbench and rolling out the pastry to between 1 and 2 millimeters in thickness, or as thin as you can without it breaking. When I'm rolling, I like to rotate it 90 degrees every so often just to make sure it's not sticking to the bench, and you can use a palette knife to do that if you need to. Once it's nicely rolled out, I'm going to use a large cookie cutter to cut the rounds, or you could cut round a small saucer or something like that, as long as it's big enough to fill the tart tins that you're using. If you're making a large one, just use the sheet of pastry as it is. So I'm going to cut out a few of these, and then we're going to simply press them into the tins. So place it over the top and then gradually edge it into the corners or into the edges and press it firmly to the sides. Ideally, you want to leave a bit of an overhang on the top. If you want, you can use a bit of the excess pastry just to help push it into the edges. And with the excess pastry, you can just push it back together and roll it out again for your next tarts. And once you've done that, we're going to place them back into the fridge to chill down for another 20 minutes to half an hour, or the longer the better. Even if you left it all day, that's fine. And the reason we do that now is to allow the pastry to relax after we've been working with it, and that helps to prevent the pastry from shrinking when we bake it later in the oven. So once the pastry cases have chilled down, we're going to trim off the excess pastry just using a paring knife, going around the edges nice and neatly until we've cut all that away. And then we're going to take some small sheets of parchment paper, we'll scrunch them up so they go nicely into the edges, and then I'm going to fill them with some baking beans, and we're going to bake them in a preheated oven at 170 degrees Celsius fan for around 15 minutes. After 15 minutes, we're going to remove the baking beans and bake for a further 10 minutes. Okay, so that is the pastry cases now baked. So We're getting close to the finish line. We've got the custard ready, we've got the case ready, we've got the fruit ready, and we just need to make a glaze. So next I'm going to place these onto a cooling rack, leave them to cool completely before we can fill them. And in the meantime, we're going to warm up some apricot jam. For the glaze, we're going to place around 100 grams of apricot jam into a small saucepan with 50 milliliters of water. We'll place it over a low heat, and as soon as it begins to simmer, we'll remove it from the heat and then pass it through a sieve to remove any of the lumps, and that's our glaze ready. And with that done, we've got one final thing left to do before we start assembling. Take your pastry cream from the fridge and remove the greaseproof paper from the top. Then we're going to whisk it just to loosen everything back up again and place it into a piping bag. And now we're ready to put these tarts together. To assemble the tarts, we're going to pipe in some of the custard until we have a nice even layer. Then we're going to top it with a selection of fresh berries and brush with our apricot glaze. If you like, you can finish with some fresh mint leaves. And now your fruit tarts are ready to enjoy. So there you go, fruit tarts, as simple as that. I hope you enjoyed this one. Thanks for watching, hit subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next video.